Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is around the topic why consistency is so important, especially when we are public speaking at a conference, when we're undertaking the role as a trainer, or when we're coaching someone. Consistency is one of the essences or the secret sources that makes you as a trainer, speaker, or coach have more traction, get more buy-in from the people you're trying to influence. So good morning and welcome. How to participate? Most of you have been on before. A couple of newbies, I think, ask questions as you go. There is that little Q&A box that I have open, and you're able to just type in any stage and I will answer the questions either immediately, or maybe I'll delay the answer to a different part in the webinar where I know I'm going to cover that particular question. Take notes. I do record the webinar, so if there's something you want to revisit, the recording will be available to you. And I guess most importantly, try and apply some of what I'm going to talk about, some of the teachings, to your own personal situation. Are you consistent? Have you done anything to detract from your consistency? What could you do to demonstrate greater consistency around your message, around what you're asking people to do? It's the application of knowledge that's more important than just sitting on a webinar and listening. It's what you do with the information that matters. All right, let's get underway. The agenda, so 4 ways to be more consistent. First one is do what you say you're going to do. The second one is walk the talk. We've heard this saying, but what does walk the talk mean? Consistency also means being true to yourself. This is about your values. And there is consistency of your non-verbal communication. So where does this webinar come from? So research found that consistency in words and actions builds trust with your staff, with your audience, with your colleagues. And inconsistency leads to distrust. Now, a couple of recent examples that I've observed in the last 48 hours. I've just come back from Europe, and while in Europe you get to watch a lot of CNN United States news, and the Republicans have started their lead up to choosing who's going to stand against Donald Trump. Joe Biden is one of the contenders, and in the debate he contradicted himself. In other words, he was inconsistent in his message, and the other panelists got onto that and honed in on his inconsistency and really attacked his inability to put his message forward. Closer to home, one of the Liberal federal politicians who has Chinese background has contradicted herself 3 or 4 times on national radio and on TV. And so the opposition has got into her and Scott Morrison because she's being inconsistent around her ties with Chinese organizations back in China. She says she's done this, and then in another interview she doesn't say the same thing. So people don't trust her. They doubt what she's saying is true. So really important that we're consistent in what we do, what we say, the way we act, the way we behave. Because if we falter from this position, people tend to lose trust in us. Our ability to be an effective trainer or communicator will be diminished. Our ability to be an effective leader will also be diminished. So consistency is one of those strings in your many bows to be a great communicator. So how can we be consistent? How can we build consistency as communicators? Well, as per the agenda, do what you say you're going to be. Do what you say you're going to do. This means be true to your word. Do follow up on things you promise to follow up. One of the things that I do in my workshops is I let people know, especially the visual learners, the people who like to see things, if you would like a copy of my PowerPoint slides, let me know and I'll send you a copy. And I get probably 3 to 4 out of 10 participants asking for PowerPoint slides. Now, if I ignore that, if I don't follow up and do what I say, then they won't trust me as much. So be true to your word and always follow up. Some classic examples that I have seen personally. One is someone working in the area of time management. They're a time management guru and they're running a time management workshop and they go over time. Workshop finishes at 4:30. At 4:45, they're still finishing their content because they got a little bit sidetracked with some discussions. Someone kind of disagreed with them, so they spent a lot of time building that up, and all of a sudden they're running 15 minutes late. That's not consistent with what good time management is. Another example is the financial planner who talks about the importance of not investing in depreciating assets. So you buy a brand new car and you know it's worth 10, 15,000 less later on when you drive out. And I know that Scott Pate, the Barefoot Investor, always talks about getting a second-hand car 5 years old or older and an RAC check, and that's the best value for money for that motor vehicle that you need. And this financial planner rocks up, wants to give me advice, or the real estate agent, and they're driving a brand new Mercedes Benz. I don't trust them as a financial advisor. They're making too much money, or they're going against what their financial planning philosophy, their messages are. Two examples of where they're not true to what they say. Their message, their word, and what they do are two different things. I've mentioned that I will provide a recording of this webinar should you wish to have one. I need to do that. Otherwise, you will lose trust in me. My message will be diluted. Thanks, Stephen. Stephen's just asked a question. What happens if what you say as a result of your work and what you truly believe are not the same thing? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later around your values, but that is tough. Sometimes if you are a human resource consultant and management tells you to put out a new policy that you don't agree with, people will tend to see in your non-verbal communication and in your, I guess your values are not aligned, and I'm going to speak about that later. So it'll be tough for you to sell a message to convince people to change as a result of you not being fully aligned with that message. Would I quit my job when I'm asked to do something that I don't believe in? That's an ethical debate that you need to decide yourself. And generally, you know, the policies that management wants you to roll out based on good evidence and based on rationale for the way forward for a company. It's just that you don't feel it's right. That wouldn't be enough reason for me to, to walk away. But in the extreme, if it's completely against your values, then you may need to ask someone else to do that particular presentation or that training or roll out that policy. Thanks, Stephen. Walk the talk. This means that your values align with what you say. Your actions align with what you say. Your behavior aligns with what you say. So what I say is that you need to almost breathe what you talk. I sometimes talk to my wife about family violence. Violet used to work in that particular area, and she says that some of the best counsellors that help people in family violence are people who've been through that experience themselves. So that, I guess, gives them credibility, gives them experience. Whereas a trained clinical psychologist who specialises in family violence and is telling you how to handle it, what your options, but has never experienced it themselves. Yeah, that's just a question mark that I put there. I'm not saying that they won't be good counsellors. In my own instance, as a person who stutters and seeking out a speech pathologist, and within America, a lot of speech pathologists are those people who stutter themselves, and as a result of their journey, their struggle, they decide they want to help other people who stutter, and they become speech pathologists. I guess they've got great experience in their values and they're invested in their clients. In some universities in Australia, the speech pathology students who don't stutter, and 99.9% of speech pathologists in Australia don't stutter, unlike the USA, they spend a day on campus, I guess, pretending to stutter, choosing to stutter. It's an assignment, they have to, and they experience the humiliation, the shame, the looks, the walkaways, the ignoring that a person who stutter also experiences, and they're shadowed by a colleague. So day one, person A stutters every time they speak deliberately, and they're shown how to stutter. And when they order, when they get their lunch, when they answer questions in class, and they're shadowed by person B. The next day they swap. And what the speech pathologist students report is that is the most profound experience that they have in terms of understanding what it's like to be a person who stutters. So now when they work with someone, when they ask someone to change their behaviour or let me do therapy with you, they have an understanding of what it's like to be a person who stutters. So what can you do in your message, in your leadership style, that really aligns with your message? I'm speaking at a conference in Sydney on Friday, and it's actually a stuttering conference, and I'm going to talk about the road to fluency. So I'm a relatively fluent person who stutters. I still stutter, and I need to demonstrate and I need to be congruent with my message. So my behavior and my actions while speaking need to align with my message. What can you do to walk your talk, to illustrate your message? The third way to be consistent is be authentic, be genuine, and don't fake it. I love the book by Brené Brown, and she talks about courageous leadership. So Brené Brown, you can watch her TED Talk. Brené talks about vulnerability, and I'll just type that there for you. And there's a little squiggly thing over the E, so it's not Breen, it's Brené. So Brené talks about vulnerability, and it's about not trying to hide things. And authentic leadership is where leaders actually are prepared to talk about some of their failures, their mistakes, and what they learnt from it. And they're allowed to talk about their uncertainties. I guess the old model is the leader is held up as that icon that knows everything, is always right, never makes mistakes. If you do make a mistake, you don't admit to it. You need to be a strong, assertive leader. But authentic leadership is about vulnerability. It's about sharing your own journeys, your own struggles. It's not about oversharing, and Brené Brown talks strongly about it's not oversharing, it's not going into every deep, dark secret. It's just about your vulnerabilities around your message and how you've reached your conclusion, your message, your idea, your proposal through a journey of authentic discovery, making mistakes along the way. Being genuine is being true to yourself. So one of the things I'm going to talk about body language next is the speaker who, when they get on stage, or the trainer who, when they get on stage, becomes someone else. They stand upright, they put a plum in their mouth, and they enunciate their words more perfectly, and they strut around on the stage, a little bit like Freddie Mercury. And then off stage, they're just normal, everyday person. That can cause confusion. It's the audience wants to see the genuine you. The staff you're training wants to see the genuine you. So public speaking is not a performance. It's not a performance. Freddie Mercury was performing. So don't fake it. Be authentic, be genuine. That'll help build consistency in the eyes of your audience and the eyes of your staff. And I would recommend watching the Brené Brown TED Talk or reading one of her books. Courageous Leadership is the one that's most recently out. Moving on. Be congruent with your nonverbal communication. This is your body language. Now, a lot of people get nervous with public speaking, but one of the things we need to do is look confident. If we don't look confident, then we may not be seen as being truly aligned and congruent with our message. So if you go on stage and you say, I'm really excited to be here, with a shy body language, with a small, fig leaf stance, and not making eye contact. Oh, look, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm excited to be here. People won't believe you. Let me just get rid of Brené. I don't believe I can. I believe that stays on every slide. So make sure your body language is consistent and it adds to what you're saying. It amplifies what you're saying. One of the things with consistency and congruence with your nonverbal communication is the size of your gestures. So when you're speaking in a room with 10, 12, 15 people, you're doing a training workshop, then gestures might be this size. When you're speaking to 150 people, 500 people, then your gestures need to be this size. When you're at the boardroom table, the job interview, probably one-handed gestures are all you need to illustrate what you're saying. So this is your gestural space. Small, medium, big, depending on your audience. Small gestures in front of a big audience are not aligned with what you're saying. Your eye contact is really important. That's how you build trust. Remember, it's the congruence that builds trust. It's the non-congruence, the non-consistency that builds distrust. And make sure your body language is aligned with what you're saying. So we see some politicians, Malcolm Turnbull was one whose body language, his bouncing of his hands up and down, were not adding to what he was saying. In fact, they were detracting from what he's saying. And those of you on this webinar are now wishing that I put my hands down and stop conducting an orchestra. That may illustrate enthusiasm and is really passionate and excited about what he's saying, but just the flapping of the hands will detract from your ability to be congruent and to build trust. One of the things I ask people is, are you aware of what your body says about you when you get on stage, when you get before a group of people? Have you done an audit? Are you self-aware of your non-verbal communication? Really important that you are. And simple things that people are not even aware of. Their stance, doing the fig leaf. When they're trying to be confident and assertive, the fig leaf is, I don't want to be here. The fig leaf is passive, it's shy. And if you want to study a little bit more about your nonverbal communication, another TED talk that I always recommend to people is by Amy Cuddy, and she talks about your nonverbal communication shapes who you are. So these are two TED Talks. Amy also has a book called Presence, and it's about how to have strong presence through your nonverbal communication, even if you're a little bit nervous. I mentioned this presentation in Sydney. I'm a little bit nervous. There's going to be a lot of professional people there, speech pathologists. There'll be peers, there'll be other people who stutter, and I need to do a really good job. So I will be nervous and anxious, but I'm going to walk on stage and I'm going to look confident, I'm going to look positive, I'm going to smile, I'm going to make eye contact, and people will not know that inside me I'm nervous and anxious. And so that's the 4 strategies I had for you to build consistency. And one more bonus: over-deliver consistently, over-deliver aligned with what your topic is, what your message is. So create a strong pre-event experience, create a strong post-event experience. One of the things that I do is I get Harvard Business Review online, and when I see an article that suits a particular client, a particular group, I will share that article with them. I mentioned at the start of this webinar, I've written a blog post about this same topic. So I'm amplifying my message, not only in the webinar, not only in my workshop, not only in my presentation in Sydney, but it's in my writings on LinkedIn, which is a professional social media, to a lesser extent on Facebook. I create content that amplifies my message. That's a bonus tip, along with do what you're going to do what you say you're going to do, walk the talk, be true to yourself, and make sure that you've got nonverbal communication that is aligned and congruent with your message. Last few minutes, workshops coming up, one in Perth tomorrow, thinking and speaking off the cuff. Then October workshops, Darwin, more workshops in Perth, some workshops in Bunbury. Next webinars, because I like to do lots of webinars to support my client base. 2nd of October, the power of telling your story. And then 10 steps to prepare for every presentation on the 15th of October. Your preparation will really help you, and it's just a checklist just to go through, make sure you've got everything ready, and that means when you go on stage you can just present. Any further questions, feel free to email me. Most of you have seen my movie on Stories Out Loud, and follow me on LinkedIn if you wish. But my final closing comment to you is, what are you going to do to create consistency and reduce inconsistency? Your consistency builds trust. It helps you sell your message. It helps people follow you when you're asking them to change their behavior. What can you do to be more consistent? Thanks everyone. Have a great day.